You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by ADDclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com to sign up for free webinars and programs today. Well, hello and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and I'm a productivity and ADHD coach specializing in working with professionals who are struggling to reach their potential due to challenges with things like disorganization, poor time management, procrastination, and weak follow-through. I'm also a woman with ADD myself, so I have been where many of my clients are, and I've come out the other side, so to speak. So I help my clients start firing on all cylinders in all areas of their lives so that they can have more time and more energy for what matters most to them. You can learn more about me and what I do and the services and programs I offer by visiting my website at www.coachingadvantages.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter to get helpful tips and news and podcast updates. And if you text the keyword HACK, that's HACK, to the number 33777, I'll send you my 7 productivity hacks to add hours of free time to your weeks by spending just a few smart minutes each day. Well, today I want to talk about the positive sides of ADHD, the upsides, so to speak. Now, I got to preface this because having ADD myself and having worked with adults with ADHD for more than 13 years now, I know what it's like to struggle with things like focus and distractibility and procrastination and disorganization and poor time management and weak follow-through. Did I leave anything out? Yeah, there's verbal impulsivity and perfectionism, and I'm sure I could go on and on and on, right? We put too much on our plates, we're time blind, and so much more. And I hear every day from the new clients who come to my practice for help about the incredible struggle and the incredible pain that can come from having ADHD and not managing it well for decades, right? And what this leads to is failing to reach your potential. And it's actually helping my clients overcome that pain and start to move in a direction toward performing at the level of their abilities that motivates me to do what I do every day. That's what really gets me excited. So of course, I'm acutely aware that ADHD is not sunshine and roses, right? And I sure don't mean to say that I think it is or to make light of the struggle, because the struggle is very real. We all know that. By definition, ADHD is classified as a disorder, right? And it does need to be significantly impairing for an individual to be diagnosed. But that doesn't mean it's all bad, right? That doesn't mean that our characteristics are always all bad for us. I think it's important to have a good balance in our perspective about everything, right? And that includes ADHD. So if we think of something as only good, if our glasses are a little too maybe rose-colored, so to speak, we're not going to look at how our challenges are affecting us and the people around us. We can't really move forward and make improvements if we're only focused on the good, right? That's a fact for sure. But on the other side, on the other hand, if we're only focused on the bad, if we're only focused on the negative side of our ADHD challenges, we can't really move forward and make improvements either. We will become stuck in that negativity without hope and without belief in our potential. And we sure don't want to spend too much time there either, right? So it really is important for us to have a balanced perspectives about ourselves and about our ADHD so that we really need to understand it, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. But we also really need to understand what our strengths are, what our gifts are, what those things are that make us unique, and those things that are positives for us. We all know the downsides of ADHD and those common characteristics because we're living with them every day, right? Day in and day out. Whether you are an adult with ADHD yourself, or a parent of a child with ADHD, or a friend, partner, caregiver of someone with ADHD. And we all live with these challenges day in and day out, right? I want to make sure my clients have sufficient playing time, or give sufficient playing time to the positive side though, to the upside of their own characteristics, including those ADHD characteristics, and start to focus a little more on their strengths, start to focus a little more on their positives, because that's how I believe they will be successful in learning to live well with ADHD and really reach their potential. If all we're focused on is the negative, we're not going to see the positives. We're not going to be able to lean on our strengths and use the things that we're naturally good at, the things that are natural talents, and natural gifts and strengths to help us really manage the things that we struggle with. So there are some positive things that often come along with having ADHD. And I'm going to run through some positive characteristics and some of the negative characteristics of ADHD and the positive side of those, just to give you something to think about and maybe a different lens to view yourself and the people that you care about through. So individuals with ADHD are frequently highly creative, right? We tend to be very intuitive and make intuitive connections and intuitive leaps that other people often don't make. My personal and professional experience is that we tend to see connections and relationships between things that other people may miss. We tend to be very creative, sometimes in a sort of a traditional artistic way, but often in terms of how we solve problems and seeing big picture relationships that can really be helpful in understanding more complex problems and dynamics. We tend to have great intuition when we listen to it. And again, we tend to see connections that others don't see, which can make us very empathetic, also very sensitive, right? Which can be a really good thing when harnessed correctly, right? Individuals with ADHD can also be highly energetic and willing to work really hard in areas of interest or areas that stimulate them, especially when we feel appreciated and valued. That's so important, right? When we feel appreciated and valued, and someone gets us, it's amazing what we can do. We tend to be driven, again, especially in areas of interest or passion. And we are often entrepreneurial in spirit, right? Individuals with ADHD are something like 300% or 3 times more likely to own our own businesses. So we tend to be the entrepreneurs of the world. Most of my clients, most of the adults that come to me are entrepreneurs in some way or another. They either own their own business or they run their own business within the confines of another organization, like, physicians and trying to think of examples, accountants that work for other firms but manage their own client load, lawyers. But generally, we tend to be entrepreneurial in spirit, right? There are so many really successful entrepreneurs who are known to have ADHD. And if you think about them, one of the things they have in common is that they use their creativity and their out-of-the-box thinking to develop businesses in their fields that are really different from anything else. For example, Richard Branson, right? He's a absolute business mogul. He founded the Virgin conglomerate of companies, Virgin Records, Virgin Mobile. There are a million Virgin Airlines, Virgin Intergalactic, right? There are a lot of them. David Needleman founded JetBlue Airways. Again, another company that has its very unique business model in its industry. Paul Orfalia, one of my favorite examples. He founded the Kinko's brand, right? You can read more about him and how he successfully overcame dyslexia and ADHD to create one of the United States' most successful companies. He has a book called Copy This. It's his, I believe it's an autobiographical. But Kinko's, when it was, first founded, was different than anything else out there. And another really good example of someone who used their creativity and their entrepreneurial spirit and their out-of-the-box thinking to create a really unique business model is Ingvar Kamprad. He is the Swedish founder and chairman of the IKEA stores. And if you have ever been in an IKEA store, especially in their early years, there was nothing like it anywhere, ever. I mean, it was a completely unique experience, and it really still is. But again, these are all great examples of entrepreneurs who use their creativity and their out-of-the-box thinking to come up with and implement some really unique approaches to the way business is done in their respective industries. There are lots of other good examples I know of individuals who've been really successful by learning to live well with their ADHD brains and really use their strengths. And of course, there are many celebrities and athletes we know to have ADHD. Adam Levine, who's a musician and TV personality, Howie Mandel, a comedian, TV personality, business person, Justin Timberlake, musician, actor, just general TV and movie personality and businessman, and then Michael Phelps, U.S. record-winning Olympic gold-winning swimmer. Trying to think of others. I'm sure they'll come to me and they'll come to you. And if you do have ideas and if you do have some insights into your favorite either successful business people or successful individuals with ADHD, visit us in the ADHD Support Talk community on Facebook and share them there. We can get a nice conversation going. I like to remind my clients who are adults with ADHD and parents of children with ADHD that having this brain wiring, having ADHD, doesn't necessarily have to mean that our future is limited. And I think these are some really good examples. And there are good examples all around you of highly successful professional adults who've learned to live well with their ADHD brain wiring. And I have the privilege of working with some incredibly brilliant and talented individuals over the last 13 plus years, like doctors, lawyers, therapists, educators, accountants, business owners, and so much more. Successful people in just about every profession you can imagine, all of them with ADHD. It really can be quite inspiring. So even though this brain wiring we call ADHD sometimes, can really knock us down, and it comes with its share of lots of challenges, many of the most common ADHD traits can have a positive side too. So even our negative challenges actually have an upside to them if you can look at them that way. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. So let's take distractibility, for example. And by distractibility, I mean that hallmark difficulty with regulating our focus, right? We know that ADHD isn't really a deficit of attention. It's more of a deficit in our ability to regulate our attention, choosing what we're supposed to be paying attention to in the moment, filtering out, resisting distractions, sustaining our attention on what, we're supposed to be paying attention to in the correct moment and all of that. Well, the upside to our difficulty with regulating our attention and sustaining our attention is that we can be prone to really intense forms of concentration, what we call hyperfocus. And it can be terrific when it's channeled well. Another upside of our distractibility is that we tend to have interest in many, many diverse things. So many of us with ADHD tend to be good at lots of different and varied things, and we tend to have a very wide variety of skills and interests, right? Some of you may know that, like you guys, I've worn a lot of different hats in my life, and I'm laughing because my clients are always kind of surprised that before I was an ADHD coach, I was a professional writer and researcher. And I was even a professional singer for a short time. It wasn't my full-time gig, but I spent some time as a professional singer. I've also owned many rental properties, which I used to manage and maintain myself. And so I have some pretty good home improvement skills, right? One of my good friends teased me that if you know someone who's getting married, I can write their vows and I can sing in their wedding and then drywall their new home for them, right? So I don't know about all that, but seriously, like so many of you, I have this wacky set of unrelated skills because most of us are jacks of many trades, so to speak. I'm not the master of any of those. The one thing I'm really good at is what I do for a living, but I have lots of different interests and different skills, and that's just, like the tip of the iceberg. And I'm sure many of you with ADHD can say the same thing about yourselves, and many of you who are friends with or care for people with ADHD can say that about the people that you know that tend to struggle with these kinds of challenges. Procrastination even has a little bit of an upside, right? It can be a really difficult challenge for so many of us, and it can affect us so pervasively in all areas of our lives, really. But even procrastination has a little bit of an upside. Much of the time, those of us with ADHD are struggling with procrastination because we have such high standards and expectations for ourselves. So we often get stuck because we expect such high quality work from ourselves. And when we get stuck sometimes, when we're procrastinating, sometimes we're very carefully analyzing whatever it is we're stuck on. And sometimes we come up with a good solution or approach. And sometimes we're just really hyper-focused on making sure that what we're doing is the best it can be. And that can be problematic. But again, when it's channeled well, it can really be a positive quality. There are so many more. I could talk about this, for hours, and maybe we'll do another podcast on it at some point in the future. But, even our impulsivity can have an upside, right? It can be such a big problem for so many of us with ADHD, and it doesn't always show up as physical impulsivity. It can show up as trouble moderating our emotions. It can show up as verbal impulsivity, right? Putting our foot in our mouths or saying something without thinking first. But the upside of our impulsive tendencies is that we tend to be spontaneous and quick sometimes, right? Not always, but sometimes. We tend to be very genuine. We tend to give gut, genuine, sincere responses, which is one of the things I love about working with our tribe. We tend to be what you see is what you get, kind of people. And we tend to be willing risk takers at times. I think it was Hallowell that said, creativity is impulsivity gone right. something like that. But it's definitely true with us. Some degree of impulsivity and willingness to take risks is imperative to being a successful business person and a successful entrepreneur, right? Absolutely an important quality that has some upsides. And there are so many. There are absolutely so many. Some things I want you guys to think about, right? Some things that most of us don't think about when we're thinking about ADHD and we're thinking about the struggles of our characteristics or our ADHD related traits. Learning to manage these challenges and balance them with an appropriate focus on our strengths and the positive side of who we are and how we're wired and what we're due can really go a long way in helping us live successfully with ADHD. And I think this awareness is one of the fundamental keys to success with ADHD, or what I like to call learning to live well with ADHD. Of course, you need to learn about ADHD in general, but you really need to learn about how it's showing up in you as an individual to be really successful and to really know yourself, right? Know how your challenges manifest and how you work, but really what your strengths are, right? How you do things naturally, how you process information, how you organize things naturally. Even your own sort of unique quirks and tendencies can be used as strengths and can be used to compensate for the things that you struggle with. It really is about learning to work with your brain, not against it. So as hard as it is to live with ADHD sometimes, try a little harder to embrace your uniqueness, your individuality, and even your quirks, and try to look for the positive side to your tendencies, or your partners, or your loved one, or the people that you care for. Each one of us is unique, and when we can learn to embrace that, we can really start living the lives we're meant to live. And that is what we try to do with our clients in coaching in a nutshell. So I hope you found something helpful in this episode. I hope I've given you something to think about. I always appreciate your attention. If you have questions, if you have insights, if you would like to share some thoughts on this, please join us in the ADHD Support Talk community on Facebook. Love to have some conversations, answer any questions you might have there, absolutely. And of course, if you find our podcast helpful, if you find the information, helpful to you, please visit us on iTunes and leave us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And we'd love to have more people benefit from these podcasts and these episodes as we create them. Again, I am productivity and ADHD coach Lynne Edris of coachingadvantages.com. I will catch you guys again soon. As always, I appreciate your attention. Thanks for listening.